Right. Well, earlier this morning, a few hours ago, I put up a video in response to a, another video that Shabir Ally, Dr. Shabir Ally, had put up about a week ago. It was a video done from Ramadan where he was finally admitting that there were different Arabic Qur'ans. I'm sure it's not the first time he's admitted it, but it's fascinating that he is doing it at this time, and it's fascinating that he's doing it so publicly. And I can see the reason why he had to put it up. This question is coming up all over the internet. It's coming up all over in many schools and universities. It's on Facebook, and he had to finally come and put down on video what is going on here. And so he was very eloquent in his rebuttal. And his rebuttal was very simple. He just said, listen, yes, we do know there are diacritical variants. These are dots and vowels, difference in dots and vowels. But he was also very careful to always say over and over and over again that these dots, these vowels don't change any meaning, and that they don't change any belief or any practices. He must have said that 5 or 6 times. I said that in the last video. And many of you who have commented, I've been looking at the comments and I've seen, he's given up the Quran. No, he hasn't given up the Quran. This is nothing really that serious yet. All he is conceding is what has already been known. This is what we know as Qira'at. This is what we know as ahruf. Now, Muslims, unfortunately, have not been told this, and that's why he finally had to come and go public with it, and that's why it seems so startling to us who have heard Muslims say, and himself, including Shabir Ally, on many occasions, certainly in the 1990s, he used to say that the Quran we have today is exactly the same Quran that exists in the Topkapi, there in the Topkapi Palace, in the Samarkand Quran that we have in Tashkent. He has said this over and over again, that the Quran in our hands today is exactly the same as it has been for 1400 years. And when he says exact, that means there have been no changes. And unfortunately, he has been recorded saying this many times, and now he's had to come back, and he's having to now, at this point, in this juncture, because we brought it up so many times, because we've been all over the world on all these videos, and we've been doing this. Hatun and I have been doing this, I've been doing this since 2014. Hatun and I have been doing this since 2016, where she went around and she went and collected all these Qurans, and she was able to correct. In 2016, so we're talking about 4 years ago, she had only 26 Qurans. She is up to 37 now, 37 that she and her team have collected all over the Arab-speaking world, in places like Morocco and places like Yemen and in Jordan. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to help you understand why the Qira'at, what he's talking about, what exactly is he referring to, what are these dots, what are these vowels. Now, I did a talk back in September of last year, in 2019, at Kensington Temple, KT, which they filmed. And it's the first time, I think, that I've been filmed where I've actually looked and shown what we're talking about. So I'm going to put that film on, just about a 10-minute clip for you, so you can follow what we mean and what Shabir Ally means by Qira'at and ahruf. So sit back, get some coffee, get some tea, and enjoy. This is what I said, about maybe 6 months ago. Now let's get to the diacritical variants. And these are probably the ones that caused the Muslims the most anger when we introduced them 3 years ago here in London. What do we mean by diacritical variants? Except for 2 of you, the rest of you don't know what I'm talking about. So let's help you and unpack it so we can see what's going on. Take a look at those 2 manuscripts. Can you notice there's no dots above and below the lines, right? That is straight razm consonantal text. The consonantal text is what is known as razm in Arabic. That's the Samarkand manuscript, which is in Tashkent. Over here is the Sana manuscript, which is in Yemen. Both of these are 8th century documents. And you can see there's no vowels, there's no curlicue for the dhamma, there's no line at the top for the fatta, and there's no line below for the kasra, the u, the a, and the e sound. There's 3 vowels in Arabic with the long vowels as well. That's why when you look at these, how do you know what you're reading? You can't read them, and that's why from the very beginning you can see it's a very inexact text. So in Arabic, as I said earlier, there are 28 letters. But 6 of the letters are unique. The aleph, the kaf, the lam, the mim, the ha, and the waw. Those are the 6 letters that don't need any dots. They always remain the same regardless of where they're found in the word. The other 22 all need dots. What do I mean by that? Well, take a look at that smiley face. One smiley face. You put one dot above it, it's a nun. Two dots above it, it becomes a ta. Three dots above it, it becomes a tha. That same smiley face, if you put one dot below it, becomes a ba. Two dots below it, it becomes a ya. Which means you can get 5 different letters with just one smiley face. Na, ta, tha, ba, ya. Can you see the dilemma? How, therefore, can you read when Arabic unless you have the dots? If you put 3 of those smiley faces together, one after another, you can get 19 different words depending on where you put the dots. Now, Al-Fadi says he can actually get 31 different words, but that's because he knows Arabic so much better than the rest of us from Saudi Arabia. Why is that important? Well, this is where the Qira'at and ahruf come into being. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say Qira'at and ahruf? These are the diacritical differences. Because of the fact that there are so many diacritic possibilities to put those dots in anywhere, you can imagine that there's going to be whole schools of differences depending on what reading you're going to give. And when you hear about the readings, they're talking about this. So in the 8th and 9th century, you had different schools that were creating completely different Qur'ans with different readings, and here they are. These are just 26 of the 32 we now have here in London. We've gone around the world and we've now found them. Hatun Tash is the one that's done this. Hatun Tash on my team. She has found them in Morocco. She's found them in Jordan. She's found them in Yemen. Just those 3 countries. She's come up with now, it's 32. Well, I'm even behind times. Now, every one of these are students. These are students of the Quran that come from 5 different cities. Those are the 5 cities: Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Kufa, and Basra. These 5 cities in the 9th and 10th century especially, late 8th century, 9th and 10th century, they were coming up with so many different variations of the Quran depending on where the dots were, that they each had their own Quran, and they each started their own schools. And if you look at these brown areas, these brown clouded areas, you can see Al-Bazi there had 1,054 differences from the Quran that we use today. Qalum had 1,700 differences. Hisham had 1,300 differences. Come on down to Abu al-Harith, and he had 5,000 differences. We have just looked at 23 of these Qurans, and we've already found 93,000 differences. Just by looking at 23. These are all Arabic Qurans. The differences are all in the diacritical marks and in the vowelization, but primarily the diacritical marks. And that's why when Muslims are talking about this, usually when they're talking about different Qurans, they're talking about the Qira'ats. And what most Muslims will say, these are all the same. The problem is there is one that was chosen because since there are so many differences, they had to come up with one canonical version, and they came up with this man right here, Hafs. Hafs is the one that was chosen, but look when he died, 796. So he died in the late 8th century. His Quran is 144 years after Muhammad. Does that bother any of you? It gets worse. Let's continue on. So you can see these manuscripts, these earliest manuscripts, had no dots above and below the lines, those 5 dots, either 3 above or 2 below, and no dhamma, kasra, and fatha, the u, e, and the ah sound, 2 above and 2 below, one a curlicue, one a slash, and 1 slash below. And because they don't have any of this, you can see why there are many different derivations, and that's why we've been able to come up with about 93,000 differences in just the 23 Qurans that the team that Hatun has there in England has put together. Now, Hatun doesn't speak Arabic, so this is not her work. This has all been done by those who do speak Arabic. These are people who are scholars who don't want to go public, and so Hatun goes public for them. So do I. What's fascinating to me is what Shabir Ally is trying to insinuate is that these don't change the meaning. We've already done the video earlier this morning to show that it was just 6 examples out of 93,000 that we could show, they do change the meaning. I remember after we went down to Speaker's Corner and introduced this back in 2016, Hatun and I then went and did a studio copy. It's up on Fander Films. You can look at it, where we looked at 70 of these variants, and we showed in every case, looking the same type of slides that you just saw earlier this morning, the same type of slides, and we showed, and in every case they change the meaning. So this puts to an end this idea, this notion that Muslims have that the Quran that we have today is exactly the same that exists in heaven. In chapter 85, verse 22 of the Quran stipulates that it's the exact same Quran that Muhammad was revealed to Muhammad via the angel Gabriel in 610 to 632, is exactly the same as the Quran that Uthman finally canonized and put together in 652, and is exactly the same Quran that has existed for 1400 years. That is no longer true, where we have a multiplicity of Qurans. We're up to 37 that we have collected, or I should say that Hatun has collected, and I would imagine there's still 2 or 3 more that are yet out there that we still cannot find. Once you show this to Muslims, they will react. And that's one reason why you have to give credit to Shabir Ally for going up there and going public with this. The difficulty he is finding now is that he is now having to retract almost everything he has said earlier. Back in 2014, when I came up with the 6 different manuscripts, and these were not diacritical manuscripts that I was showing him. These are much more devastating. We haven't yet got to that. We haven't got into the skeletal, the razm, the consonantal differences, the consonantal variants. That we're going to do yet. That's coming yet. But when I introduced that in 2014, 6 years ago, in front of about 700 people, now that has gone viral. That debate that we had in 2014. His only response, because he was not even aware of this. Now this is one of the leading scholars in the Islamic world. He is the one who, my goodness, he is considered to be their best debater. He did his doctoral thesis on this very material, and he wasn't even aware of just the skeletal razm, the original manuscripts, so the ones that don't have dots, the ones that don't have any of these vowelizations. That when you looked and I showed him there at that time in 2014, Dr. Dan Brubaker had already found 800 variants. These are consonantal variants. His only response, for 19 minutes, I went back and timed it afterwards. For 19 minutes, he kept on saying, this is nothing more than the miracle of the number 19. If you take these set of verses with these set of verses, as I said earlier, and I don't want to repeat myself, he came up with 19, 19, 19. 19 minutes wasting our time. If that was the only response he had in 2014, since then he has suddenly had to jack up. He's had to realize that he doesn't want us to get into that discussion. So he's trying to keep us zeroed in to this discussion. He only wants us to talk about the diacritical variants. He only wants us to talk about the ahruf and the Qira'at, because they can defend that. As you can see, he's trying to defend that. And all he can say is by tiptoeing around, jumping from one loop to another, saying, oh, this is nothing more than, there's no change of meaning here. There's no beliefs that have changed. There is no practice that has changed. And the only one example he gave is, it doesn't say in one point that God is one, and then says that God is many. Did you notice that's a barb against stuff? He tried to say, see, that's what you got with your Bible. You try to say that God is one of, you have 3. He was showing that there's nowhere that any of these variants say that. Well, we're not saying that any of these variants say that. We're not even saying that they changed the meaning that much. The fact that there's one letter change, the fact that there's one word change, destroys this notion that the Quran has been perfectly preserved, destroys the notion that this comes from heaven, destroys the notion that this is eternal, destroys the notion that for 1400 years no men have had any control over it, that it comes straight from God, that it is the only the revelation that is above criticism. That's what we're trying to knock down. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring that Quran back down to human level, because what this is proving, a little by little, he's now pulling back. He's pulled back from 2014. He's pulled back from 2016. Now he's saying in 2020, oh yes, there are variants, but they don't change the meaning. He's trying to take what we have said about the Bible. We've said this for centuries about the Bible. We know that those variants that we have in the Bible do not change any meaning, no doctrine. But we're not making the claim about the Bible that they're making about the Quran. We have never said the Bible is eternal. We have never said that the Bible exists in heaven on eternal tablets. We have never said that it was sent down without any human interference. We know it was written by man. We even give the names of the authors to the books that they wrote. So we're talking about 2 different categories. We don't make the claims they make. The claims they make, they have to make, because there's no authority for the Quran outside of eternality. Without eternality, without this inimitability of the Quran, without this notion, the Quran is nothing more than a man-made document, like any other document. And that's why you don't have to defend it. You don't have to defend the content of it. You don't have to defend anything about it. You don't even have to defend all the contradictions or the historical errors or the scientific difficulties within the Quran. You don't have to defend any of that. You don't have to defend anything about source criticism, about where it came from, all these stories that came from many different sources. You don't have to defend all of that. You can just say, but it comes from heaven. It is eternal. And as long as they say that, they don't have to therefore debate it and to debate against us. That's why that has been so. That is why it has been so easy for them for all these years not to have to debate the Quran. Well, now we're going to force them to do so. This is always the first. This is not the first chink, but this is one of the chinks in the armor that is now starting to destroy the Quran. It is nothing more than a human document. Like we've been saying, like I've been saying I've been saying this for 20 years. It is nothing more than a document like any other, written by men and women like you and me. Men and women like you and me, who are failed individuals. And as a result of that, we're taking the Quran and bringing it down to the level of the Bible. But see, unlike the Bible, which is relevant for everybody, anywhere, at any time, the Quran is not. We don't have to defend the Bible's eternality. We don't ever do that. No Christian has ever done that. Muslims do. And that's why Shabir is not going to be very popular in the Muslim world after this video of last week. And we're going to make sure the rest of the world hears it. Now, there are other mistakes he made, but after this video, I want to show you a third video as to the reaction the Muslims gave us when we actually showed this at Speaker's Corner back in 2016. Okay, until then, this is Jake, over and out.